Hello again, this is Zephyr, and I'm going to be sharing something a little bit different today. So in my past videos, I have talked about eventually sharing a Diablo 2 mod. I have modded Diablo 2 for over 10 years, off and on, and this mod is my personal mod, but I'm going to be sharing it, and I'm going to be playing it on my YouTube channel. This mod only works with the older version of Diablo 2, version 1.13c, and it is not resurrected. It is legacy. So when I do play this, I plan on playing it only in hardcore mode as an extra challenge. And this is not meant to be a perfectly balanced redesign of the game. This is meant to be more of a designer exercise. I decided to do this mod a couple years back, and I've enjoyed playing it here and there. It is the only version of Diablo 2 I now play because it means I am in control of many of the changes and bug fixes even. So this is merely just an introduction into the playthroughs I'll be doing. So these patch notes are not exhaustive, they're more big picture. So for code edits, one of the things I was able to do is unlock the restriction on melee weapon range. This allows a melee weapon to do any kind of range within the system that is functional. So in essence, most melee weapons have had their range increased approximately 90 or even 100% of their base range. Your general sword, you're not going to notice a whole lot of difference. Most of them already had a range of, say, 2. Whereas in your spear, the two-handed spear, has a range of 8 instead of 4. This creates a way to differentiate melee weapons a little bit more, and I am very fond of it. I think it feels really interesting, and this does actually play into some of the abilities as well. So if you're using the ability Fend on the Amazon, ignoring all the changes in Diablo 2 Resurrected, of course, the ability itself has a much larger reach around your character. And so you can stand still. It attacks multiple enemies in a circle, sort of, attacking them individually one at a time as you stand still. With the longer range on a polearm or a spear, spears have the most, then the attack itself is able to really truly fend off enemies before they get to you. Other changes here. Defense or armor class is no longer reduced while running. I didn't find this to be a very interesting effect in the game. It is not well known by the average player that when you're running versus walking, your shield block and your armor chance to hit effect are reduced significantly. Armor is reduced to 0, and your block percent is reduced by 2/3. So I left the block percent the same, which means that if you want more block percent chance, you're going to potentially toggle back and forth between a slower movement and a faster movement. But for just running around, your armor still protects you. A simple change, block percentage is always shown on the stats page. This is primarily for the assassin so that you can see your block percent in your stats instead of having to go to the skill itself. Ethereal item chance has been increased by 4 times from 5% to 20%. I find this to be at least entertaining. I'm entirely going to be playing solo self-found, and ethereal items give you kind of a weird boost, as weapons have 50% more base attack damage and armors have 50% more base armor class, so to say, defense. Arrows and bolts have increased quiver size. This required a code edit, so they average per quiver a similar ratio as, say, a weapon in Diablo 1 for wearing out. So you'll have to go and buy or find more arrows or bolts. The quivers for crossbows actually carry more bolts than arrows do. And crossbows have been changed slightly as well. Health and mana potions no longer have a class bonus. So in the past, if you used it on, say, a barbarian, it would give upwards of 200% the value that it would on a sorceress. I have changed these to have a percentage health value, which means that it is not necessary or not as valuable to have a class bonus. There's been a small CPU bug fix to reduce hardware and battery usage. There is a change to passive resist reduction, such as Cold Mastery and the Rainbow Faucets, where they can now pierce immunities. It does pierce at the normal reduced rate, so it's nothing crazy. And then when items drop, they roll affixes, prefixes and suffixes, basically modifiers. But in the code, the max level was not being enforced. So some things that might give, say, +1 max damage were never falling out of the pool originally. And I'm not even sure this has been fixed for Diablo 2 Resurrected. I haven't followed it closely enough to know whether or not that has been changed. And in some ways, this is not entirely a bug. It just may have been unused code. Characters have been changed a little bit to be a little bit more uniform. This is definitely a deviation from the Diablo genre, or at least the Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 specific games, where other games like Path of Exile or Grim Dawn might have more of a generic focus on stats and attributes. So energy now acts as a focus or a magic stat in that it gives a small spell bonus per 100 energy. So this bonus, I say it's small, it is 12.5%, but it's multiplicative to any remaining synergies. I'll get to synergies in a minute. Energy now always gives 2 mana regardless of character class, so it doesn't matter if you're a sorceress or barbarian. Vitality no longer gives stamina. Stamina is the one thing I believe David Brevik, one of the original creators, has said was basically just a mistake and probably should have never been done. So I have been actually playing with a modified version of stamina that acts a little bit more like Salt and Sanctuary or Dark Souls, where it regenerates quite quickly, and it actually played really nicely. But for the sake of showing off the mod, for the sake of sharing the mod, I'm just going to go with the default option of stamina is relatively ignorable. Vitality now gives 2 life regardless of character class. Same thing with mana. This hurts some classes and helps others, both for the mana and the life. I have further adjusted life and mana per level on each class. It always gives a total of 4 points, such as 4 health, 4 mana, 2 health, 2 mana, 1 health, 3 mana. You get the idea. This means that you're always getting 5 stat points per level, and you could assign those to vitality, energy, strength, dexterity, but you're also getting a forced value of 2 points that you're not allocating at all. They're pre-allocated for you, basically. This, I feel, gives a sort of class definition without completely removing it from the previous changes to the energy and vitality stats themselves. It is still overall probably a nerf to most classes. Stamina costs, continuing on that, they've been normalized against 100 stamina, so it kind of counts as 100%. You no longer gain stamina on a level up, you no longer gain stamina from vitality, but stamina costs have been reduced to half of their original values, so you can focus on them a little less. Items can still give stamina or stamina regen from the base game. Any values here can or should be adjusted at some point to be relative to the 100% base. All run and walk speed bases have been reduced. This means that you will be in more mosh pits. You will be running away for more of your safety and actually be able to be hit. Boots and various other things that give movement speed will be more valuable. I know that they were already quite valuable, but they will be even more valuable. And you'll be potentially unable to run away from many of the enemies. Again, this is a nerf. This is meant to be making it a little bit harder. This is not a mod for rushing through and getting to hell difficulty and getting your max level rune words. This is more of a LAN mode, multiplayer LAN or single player solo self-found kind of mod. I play it with friends sometimes, and I play it by myself. Strength damage bonuses had more or less pretty weak effects. So I'm adjusting this overall on many of the weapons. In the past, many of the weapons had little secret stat scaling bonuses. So like a javelin or a spear might be 75% strength, 75% dexterity, which made it so that you couldn't really focus on a given stat, but bonus stats from items were actually quite powerful for those overall. So I want to increase the value of strength and dexterity against vitality. I want to increase the value of energy, or as I'm trying to call it, focus or intelligence against the vitality stat. And this is one of the ways to do that, in my opinion, is to increase the value of the percentage bonus on melee and other weapons, especially increasing it further on two-handed weapons. So if you're using a two-hander, you're losing the value of multiple affixes that you would probably have from a shield. So like Spirit Shield is a very popular rune word and other things that are very powerful. So using a two-handed weapon should be at least as powerful as using a one-handed and a shield. So the strength bonus has been increased as one way to offset that loss of defense. And most two-handed weapons also have increased range. Dexterity damage bonus increased for the same reasons. Things like daggers are now dexterity and strength. So you can get, it's like a 50% strength bonus or a 100% dexterity bonus, something like that. I don't remember exactly. I've changed it a couple times. I'm not going to be using daggers for my first run, so we can ignore that for some time at this point. Attack rating has been changed slightly. If for any reason anyone out there is a programmer or hacker or modder for specifically Diablo 2, reach out to me, please, or comment, because I'd love to be able to make attack rating scale a little bit differently. I'd love to remove specifically the character level from the attack rating formula, as I'm just not a big fan of level scaling things that are especially hidden in the back end. I would like the attack rating to be directly related to the armor class within the game, so that a high armor target is harder to hit, but a higher level enemy isn't necessarily harder to hit. But alas, I don't know how to do that at this time to remove that. I don't know the location in the code to manipulate that. But all spells now use attack rating for hit chance. This means that your fireball can miss. It will still explode, but it could miss. This is intended to be more like Diablo 1, which did use a magic attack rating for spells. It did technically use monster level for that. But Grim Dawn also uses a similar mechanic where you have offensive and defensive abilities, where the higher your offensive ability, the more likely your attack will be to hit. So this is something I actually really like. I feel like Diablo and the Diablo likes that I enjoy to play. I'm not huge into Path of Exile, more into Grim Dawn, more into Diablo 2, more into Diablo 1 a little bit. And I really like the idea of not knowing if something is going to connect vitally to an enemy. The idea to me is that if you're wearing armor or holding up a shield, that fireball may not connect to something vital. Yeah, it might do a little bit of damage, might do a lot of bit of damage, but the idea that I can kind of keep the damage itself relatively consistent while also making it so that the hit chance is inconsistent, I think is quite interesting personally. Anything that is more of a standing effect, like poison gas that stands still, Inferno and Arctic Blast that you have to stand still, that are more of like a moving breath or gas, ground fire, that kind of stuff. So poison javelin, poison explosion, meteor fire, immolation arrow fire, these things always hit. Explosions don't always hit, but these things do. So these still work like the original game. The rest of the projectiles in the game, yes, all those technically are projectiles. The rest of the projectiles in the game do now use attack rating at all times. So your firebolt, your ice bolt, your lightning, your chain lightning, your charge bolt, these can miss now. And I believe this means that they can also be blocked. This increases the value of armor class. This increases the value of block chance. Buffs and effects have been re-standardized, specifically in their durations. I'm not a big fan of, how should I say this? I guess I'm not a fan of a lot of the buffs in the game being all over the place in duration. I'd rather have most of the buffs be like 1 minute or 2 minutes, something in that range, and then just not really increase, so that they're more static in their usefulness. Whereas in other abilities like Werewolf, Werebear, Energy Shield, I've made them effectively last kind of forever. They last for 25 minutes. They're not really intended to be a refreshable. You're just kind of meant to use them. They're just meant to be there. So some buffs are meant to be more of a reusable. They will cost more energy that way because you're having to recast them. They may turn off in the middle of a fight and be a threat to you, while others might not. For example, one of the reasons Energy Shield lasts effectively forever is that Energy Shield is automatically turned off if you run out of energy. And if you've ever played Diablo 2 and run into a pack of mana burn enemies, then you'll understand what I mean by that. Potions. So all health and mana potions now give a percentage plus flat amount of healing value. This means that they're pretty good at the level that you find them in. There's about 1 potion per act in the game, where there's your minor potions and your super potions and your great potions and whatnot. There's 5 acts, there's 5 types of potions. So they're scaled around and reduced in drops as well, so that you find more of them as you move to, say, Act 2 for the next potion type. And the potions themselves, because they give a percentage plus a flat healing value, they will scale with your character. So if you want lesser potions, or if all you can find is lesser potions, you're still going to have value in that as you move through the game. I've honestly debated on just removing all the different types of potions or minimalizing it down to something like light and greater, but I haven't gotten that far, and I'm not sure if I want to do that yet, or at all. Mana costs across the board have been restandardized, so many skills now cost a lot more upfront, but no longer increase their cost per level. There's a couple abilities that were left in Legacy version. They have only recently, more or less recently, been fixed in the Resurrected version, but skills like multiple shot on the Archer allows you to increase the amount of arrows you get every level, and eventually it ran out of maximum arrows. There was a limit of 24, and it would just increase forever in mana cost. Now, I have a whole video I'm going to be talking about mana cost progressions and expectations and personal opinions on that. It might even end up being 2 videos, depending on how I want to cut it. But basically speaking, I'm not a big fan of a lot of abilities increasing by small magnitudes in mana cost. It feels punishing. It feels unfair. I'm not a big fan. So that's been removed. So pretty much no ability increases in mana cost, and most abilities, if they have a high mana cost, they actually decrease as they level up, or they stay static. Most physical attacks are static in cost. They already were, but many have been added to that pile. So multiple shot, for example, now costs, I believe, 12 mana at all ranks, but it does not go up in cost. So it is costing it has a cost similar to, say, the level 10 or level 9 original cost, which also means that you need less mana potions, mana leech, etc., to actually deal with the cost of it. It's just more of an upfront cost. Synergies, especially damage synergies, have been reduced or removed entirely across the board. Synergies are something that didn't exist when I first played Diablo 2. I had strong opinions then, but I was also much younger. I actually liked the idea of synergies when they first came out. I thought they were kind of a little strong, but I very quickly, within the year that they came out, I very quickly had some mixed opinions about them back in, I believe, what was that, 2003, 2004, something like that. And one of the things that the Synergy update did, there's 2 things. One, it introduced a ton of rune words that were actually absolutely overpowered and took over the game. And 2, it introduced so many synergies that made it so that duo elemental sorceresses or tri-elemental sorceresses or hybrid various builds became a lot weaker. And I don't think that that was the original intention of the game's design. I think the skill trees were meant to be mixed and matched together. I think skills were meant to be mixed and matched together. And the idea of damage types being available, I believe, was more or less the original intent of a lot of characters. Being able to have a werebear or werewolf use fire claws and not have to specialize into something else, and just be able to have this extra effect that kind of helped deal with, say, a physical immunity here and there. So synergies have been removed or reduced across the board. Some of the examples of what has been remaining is things that are more similar to, say, Diablo 1's relative synergies that were hidden. So Guardian, or the equivalent Hydra in Diablo 2, in Diablo 1 it was called Guardian, it would spit fireballs or firebolts at enemies. The higher the level of your firebolt, the higher the damage of your firebolt. However, your Guardian would spit firebolts of an equal level of what you had learned, and if you hadn't learned Firebolt, it would spit a level 1 Firebolt. So Hydra is going to be restylized, at least in part, to follow a similar build path, which means that Hydra will do quite a bit less base damage and will do more damage based on your Firebolt level. Similarly, Firebolt will probably go into Fireball slightly, and these will be multiplicative to the energy or focus bonus that is now present on all characters. So you're not going to be losing out if you have high focus on your character from the synergies that exist. Level requirements on a lot of skills have been reduced. So an example of this would be the Barbarian. If you start up the Barbarian, he has multiple masteries that you can get to, and all those early game weapon masteries have now been unlocked for instant level ups. This is a change in the skill tree. It's a change in pattern and paradigm, but it's just something that I feel makes the game go a little bit faster. You can jump straight into using a pole arm or a javelin or a throwing weapon or something like that. And similarly, the skills that do exist all over the place on most normal characters have had their starting level requirements reduced as well. So what this means is that you will be able to level up a lot quicker into your tree. It is a tree. You have prerequisites. I want to use the prerequisites more than I want to use the level restriction. Equipment and items have been changed all over the place. I have created my own prefix and suffix system. It is very similar to the original game, but many things are now available at different levels or sooner. So, for example, in the original game, you might not find a +1 to sorceress skills or +1 to barbarian skills amulet right away. You might find that just a couple levels sooner. And various things have been offset so that you're not being bombarded with a lot of different prefixes and modifiers all across the gameplay. You will now have a gradual build up to different power levels and different mechanics. I am not a fan of just shoving all mechanics on a player right away, so being able to control the modifiers that show up on items actually feels pretty fun. Similarly, though, some modifiers may show up at very random locations in the timeline. So there may be modifiers that have been changed in a way that they have a very low rate of showing up early. So this gives the sense of overpoweredness that I want to see normally out of something more roguelike. Diablo is definitely based on some of those aspects. So being able to find a crazy powerful ring early on, even if it's a ridiculously minuscule chance of something, I think is just really neat. So being able to find, say, a 50% magic find ring or a 100 health ring or something like that is potentially going to be possible in my mod. So that's affixes and modifiers. A lot of things are going to be chunkier. So you're going to find hopefully less rings of +1 strength or less rings of +1 maximum damage and more rings or items with like +3 or +5 strength. This is much more like Diablo 1. It is chunkier. I like bigger numbers, not necessarily huge numbers, but bigger numbers. So being able to find that kind of stuff, again, I feel like it makes you feel overpowered. It makes you feel like you found something of value. And while later parts of Diablo definitely feel like this, the early parts of Diablo 2 do not. It's been stripped away, in my opinion, in some ways that just, I would prefer the Diablo 1 way, where you have singular modifiers like +30% fire resistance is way more interesting than +5% or +8%. Because now I've got fire resistance. It's less of let's stack fire resistance and more of a I've got that problem solved. Also, +5 strength, that's only one level. You're just putting all your stats into a single stat. That's only one level. Who cares? It's not that pertinent to be that balanced. Some rough edges and imbalances make games fun, make games interesting. It makes what you pick up more random. You don't know what you're going to find. Charms have been removed from the drop pool for the time being due to the affix rebuild. I don't want to rebuild charms because they have all their own affixes, basically. And then they have their own affixes based on whether they're small, medium, or large. So I'd rather focus on things like weapons and armors and amulets and rings instead of dealing with small, medium, and large charms. I also find that a lot of charms kind of give a benefit that is too big on a lot of late game characters, and it's something that I personally would probably have more of a charm bag where you can play Tetris with it, or a charm inventory region where again you can play Tetris with it, and it's not let's fill up our entire inventory with charms, but let's be able to sacrifice some of our inventory with charms. And I think medium charms or large charms have different effects that could be swapped around. Again, I'm speaking more in the sense of normal solo self-found, normal difficulty and nightmare difficulty, and less of the super overpowered, super perfect charms of the late game. Because that's not really where I played. I didn't play super powerful late game a lot back in the day. And when I'm playing by myself on my own computer, I'm really just kind of having fun, just playing around, not so much min-maxing to the extreme. So last but not least, selling items in general and item costs and values on affixes have been changed up. That will be probably a long-term experience or a long-term process to fix, as some things sell for extraordinary amounts of money and other things sell for basically nothing. So your general items have been adjusted to be sold for like 20% of their value. I believe it's the same value as Diablo 1, which puts it back into a little bit of a survival game, just trying to scrape by with picking up specific things or finding certain things or sacrificing certain things just so you can buy a potion or identify an item. It also makes the value of finding potions in the wild more valuable, finding identify scrolls in the wild more valuable, and that kind of thing. And then gold values have been increased in specifically Act 1 so that you're not getting, again, kind of nothing for a lot of the gold values early on. And gold find overall is also increased when it actually rolls on items. So my goal for gold there is that you're finding gold as a drop and not simply just ferrying items back and forth between the world and town. I want you to pick up an item, look at it, decide if you want to use the item, throw it in your stash, throw it on your character, or throw it back on the ground. So selling items is more of a survival mechanic where if you're out of money or you really just need a little extra cash just to build up your stockpiles, that's where it's coming from. But it's less important to just simply pick up everything to sell it. Shield-based block speeds have been increased. This is a default or built-in on the shield itself. This is not a stat on the character. Then also, because I'm not focused on late game and last wish and the various other, or grief, I want smite damage to be increased. And boot damage has also been increased. So these will be more relative to an actual weapon and less just whatever. They'll just be less garbage. This is a small increase to both of these. So it's a 10% base increase in block speed. This is intended so that blocking an attack early on is actually valuable and you're not getting stuck in block stun. I have kept block stun in. I could have edited it out, but I've kept it in. I would rather more characters have good block speed and less block stun, but not remove it entirely. So kind of a middle ground there. Armor durability and weapon durability has been reduced. The weapon durability change may be undone, but armor durability is going to remain as it is. So if you're wearing cloth armor or light leather armor or something like that, it's going to take very few hits overall for that armor to kind of break mid-battle. It shouldn't break often, but it should break more often. So armor durability has been reduced. Armor values, however, have been increased. So durability only goes down when you actually take damage or are hit. So armor values have been increased somewhat. So if you're a barbarian, you're wearing heavy armor, you're going to be hit less. I feel like this is intended to be, I feel like this is a good goal for melee characters to have better armor, especially if they're boosting up their strength, that they can actually wear it. So armors will be dropping from different locations. They will have their quality or item level changed overall. This has not yet been done, but it will be done eventually, so that there will be more opportunities for early game characters to level up their strength to actually wear heavier armor. And it will also allow certain other armors to shine more. So there's going to be some balancing of what is a light armor, a heavy armor, a medium armor, what that means as well. Heavier armors no longer slow the player down. I feel like this should be a sacrifice of choice, not a sacrifice of hidden value. So most players did not know, but chest armors slowed you down, as well as I believe certain shields. Heavier shields slowed you down, but helmets and gloves and boots did not. So it was just kind of a hidden little modifier in there. I believe it actually is maintained in Path of Exile as a less hidden modifier, but I just wanted to remove it entirely. I felt like it was something that could be more explicit instead of implicit to the game's mechanics. As mentioned, weapon durability has been reduced. Weapon damage variance is also being adjusted. So variance in... So a little bit of a tangent here. Weapons in Diablo 1 had static variance to them. You had a weapon, maybe it did 2 to 5 damage, and as you level up your character and gained more strength or more dexterity, your weapon gained more damage. But it wasn't a percentage damage in Diablo 1. It was a flat value bonus. So that 2 to 5 damage overall eventually might have become 12 to 15. So the variance was becoming smaller and smaller and smaller in the later and later game. Diablo 2 decided to do something different, where they did a percentage damage bonus instead. But because they did a percentage damage bonus, and because many of the weapons have such a wide spread in the early and mid game, your base damage and your max damage, or your minimum and max damage, were often extremely wide. Now, I wanted to reduce this. And this might be controversial to hardcore Diablo players, Diablo 2 players. But so you're going to see more of the, not just weapons, but skills too. You're going to see more of the lightning skills have higher minimum damage. It's not going to be crazy high, but they're going to have higher minimum damage. It's not going to be 0. Now, again, this goes back to the attack rating system. The attack rating system is going to mean that you can hit 0. So I'd rather you actually hit something than nothing when you do actually hit, especially for melee weapons. Melee was already relatively weak until you hit mid or late game and you had good rune words or good weapons. Plus you need attack rating anyway. And as already mentioned, most melee weapons have longer reach. Belts, this is going to be a weird change, a unique change. This is kind of similar to Grim Dawn or Path of Exile if you've played those. Belts are now an accessory instead of an armor piece. And the reason I did this is I wanted belts to be different, and I wanted to have different reasons to wear belts. Belts typically didn't give a lot of armor to begin with, and I wanted your armor selections to be more meaningful. So by increasing the armor values on other pieces to make up for the belt differences, as well as just to buff them, belts no longer give armor, but they still give potion slots, and they still give stats if they roll magic, rare, or unique, of course. So what does this mean? Belts are effectively a 4th ring. You have your amulet, you have your 2 rings, and then you'll have your belt. So belts will give different things. Belts might give more health regen, or hit reduction, damage reduction, or hit recovery, kind of some of the same things that they already did. They're going to be more focused in that stuff and not on defense. So if you played Path of Exile has a lot of belts like this. My belts do not have an innate value to them like Path of Exiles. So you're not going to get energy shield or max health because you're wearing a specific belt, but you will be able to find those kind of stats on belts overall. So that's it for my introduction. I will be coming back with more videos on different topics, such as continuing the Secrets of Grandia playthrough, as well as starting the Diablo 2 show-off and playthroughs. So thank you for watching.